Discover the 7 amazing secrets of ancient lost civilizations, transformative stories revealed. Sarah stood at the front of her underfunded classroom, walls peeling, history books faded, and felt the constraints of each set of skeptical eyes. The echoes of students whispering, boring, churned inside her chest, tightening like a vice. History wasn't about dates and facts. It was a tapestry woven with mysteries begging to be unraveled. But in this tiny Appalachian town, where immediate survival overshadowed the grandeur of the past, her passion felt like a distant dream, dissipating into an atmosphere laden with resignation. Each day, the principal's curt words about budget cuts slashed through her resolve. Without a vibrant history program, her life's ambitions seemed destined to be relegated to the realm of forgotten dreams. An internal tug-of-war played out in her mind. One corner championed her love for ancient civilizations, the weight of her grandfather's legacy clinching her heart like a lifeline. The other corner screamed about practicality, about the reality of bills, job security, and the disinterest that taunted her. Would she ever be able to convince these kids that stories of the past echoed lessons for now? The fear of failure loomed large, overpowering any glimmer of hope. Every time Sarah navigated the creaky stairs of her childhood home, the attic felt like an undiscovered realm. Today, as dust particles danced in the shafts of sunlight, she uncovered an old box, each fragile journal inside connecting her to remarkable artifacts that had once been thought lost, all connected to her family. The exhilaration of piecing together these forgotten tales almost made her forget the looming threat of budget cuts. Almost. The past fed her imagination, yet the heavy, present dread churned in her stomach. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As her thoughts were spinning, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Jack, the town historian. "Let's meet. I believe there's a connection between your family history and the artifacts we've been discussing." The grit of determination submerged the doubts. But as she stared at school board members during meetings, their dismissive expressions reinforced a hurtful truth. History didn't matter in a town struggling to stand on its own. Faced with rolling eyes from her colleagues, each unchecked scoop of scorn felt like a dagger. The weight of expectations pressed against her chest. On the eve of the exhibit showcasing her findings, she faced betrayal from an old rival, a person she thought would understand. This act of sabotage sent her spiraling into a state of disbelief and despair. Would her efforts, her passion, be undone so easily? The thought of failing to honor her family's legacy clawed at every ounce of her resolve. In the midst of rising doubts, an unsettling realization tore through the air like thunder. A crucial relic, meant to transmit the connection she craved, vanished without a trace. Would anyone ever recognize her struggles? The stakes felt prohibitively high. Sarah, stricken by anguish, found herself at the edge of her own definition of who she was. A history teacher with a burning desire to matter. But could she truly reclaim the narrative before it slipped away completely in the shadows of doubt? The following morning, the classroom buzzed with the frantic energy of another school day, but Sarah felt like an island of stillness amid the chaos. The bitter remnants of betrayal clung to her like a second skin, and the absence of the artifact gnawed at her meticulously laid plans. She glanced at her students, absorbed in their own trivial matters, lunches forgotten, social dilemmas brewing. Did they have any idea how pivotal the past could be? Did they care at all? With a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders. There was no point in lamenting the past. She had to forge ahead, even if the path was obscured and fraught with uncertainty. Still, the nagging doubt echoed in her mind like a persistent mockery. What if Jack's arrival was too late? What if her own moment of revelation had slipped through her fingers? In an impulsive decision she hadn't rationalized yet, Sarah decided to restructure her lessons around the concept of lost civilizations. She recalled her grandfather's stories about the ancient Maya, the echoes of their achievements interwoven with their enigmatic disappearance. Could this serve as a metaphor not only for the artifacts, but also for their own struggle for significance in a world that seemed to have little patience for history? Today, she announced, forcing excitement into her voice, we'll discuss how the lessons of the past can illuminate our present. Together, we'll construct our narrative. She sensed the lifelessness beginning to lift. The room shifted as eyes widened in curiosity. They were listening, maybe for the first time. As the lesson unfolded, she wove tales of monumental achievements rendered moot by the sands of time. She encouraged her students to see themselves as part of a legacy, each child holding the potential to shape history in their hands. Slowly, their skepticism began to wane. Questions sparked, discussions grew fervent. A ghost of hope flickered within her. Perhaps they were beginning to understand. Later that day, as she gathered her belongings, a spark of initiative ignited. Sarah recalled the box of journals collecting dust in her attic, the ones that held stories of her ancestors and lost artifacts. Perhaps it was time to delve deeper, not just into teaching, but into her own history as well. The urge to reclaim her narrative swelled and shifted from a passive desire to an actionable plan. What connections could she draw from her family's past to create a more profound experience for her students? As she arrived home, anticipation crackled in the air. The thought of rediscovering her family's lost tales invigorated her. This time, she wasn't merely searching for relics or artifacts. She was reclaiming the intricate threads of identity that tied her to a much larger human story, her students' stories. Yet, as she ascended to the attic, a feeling of unease settled over her. What if the journals revealed more than she was prepared to handle? What if the discoveries unearthed not only artifacts, but also dark family histories that the whispers around the town had veiled in secrecy? With determination fueling her and hidden fears gnawing at her resolve, she lifted the lid of the box. Each journal looked like a time capsule waiting to unveil its secrets. What awaited her in those pages? The moment had arrived to confront not just her family's past, but the truths that lay buried beneath the historical layers she had idolized. Would she find solace or turmoil in uncovering lost legacies? And what impact could these revelations hold for her identity as both a teacher and an individual? As the musty scent of aged paper filled the air, the question lingered, poised to shape her journey. Could she redefine who she was based on what she found or what she feared to uncover? As Sarah removed the final journal from the box, a mix of apprehension and eagerness coursed through her veins. The dust that had settled on the pages seemed a testament to the time that had passed, echoing lives once lived, voices now silent. Beneath her fingertips, the leather cover felt cool and worn, a contradiction to the heat of the moment surging within her. She opened the journal, its spine cracking softly, almost as if it was awakening from a long slumber. The first entry was a simple narrative about her great-grandmother, a woman who had survived hardship in a rapidly changing world. Each word felt like a pulse through the generations, reminding her that she descended from a lineage of resilience. Yet there was a different energy swirling beneath the surface. Questions started to emerge unbidden. What struggles had her ancestors faced that mirrored her own? What stories had been purposefully silenced? She flipped through the pages, each successive entry revealing not just the mundane details of daily life, but whispers of secrets hidden in the folds of her family's history. Tales of love and loss, sacrifice and grief began to weave a tapestry she had never fully appreciated. Among them, a particularly evocative passage caught her attention. It spoke of a family heirloom, a necklace entwined with legends of betrayal and deep loyalty, rumored to bear the mark of a civilization lost to time. For the first time, Sarah wondered if the artifact she sought to reclaim was not just a relic of the past, but a symbolic representation of her family's history. It was a theme of continuity, stories that flourished in the shadow of silence. Could identifying with this heirloom lead her not only to personal truths, but also to a deeper connection with her students? Lost in thought, she suddenly grasped the implications. If she shared these narratives, fragments of her family's legacy, could they ignite a fire in her students? By revealing her vulnerabilities, perhaps she could inspire them to honor their own pasts. Yet, the fear of exposing her family's imperfections gnawed at her. Would her students dismiss her history if they discovered the darker parts? The hesitation to share was palpable. How could she teach history when fear clouded her potential? That night, she sat in her living room, the glow of a single lamp illuminating the scattered journals, her mind racing through potential lesson plans. Would extracting lessons from these stories not only enrich her curriculum, but also unify her identity as a teacher? Could she evoke an engaging dialogue where personal history met collective inquiry? With every line she read, another idea sparked. A mini-project where each student could explore their own backgrounds, crafting narratives that highlighted their roots. It was a chance to build a classroom where every child felt they belonged to a bigger narrative and understood the weight of their contributions. But as excitement surged, doubt crept back in. What if they didn't care? What if they saw their origins as just another burden? The energy of uncertainty hung heavily as she paced back and forth, jotting down ideas and concerns. She was standing at the precipice of transformation, where her history could become a bridge to something greater. Yet to make that leap, she needed to face not just her uncertainties, but a deeper truth. She had to find the strength to share, to lay bare her own fears and vulnerabilities. And so, with her heart pounding, Sarah resolved to start with her students the next day. Tension coiled within her, a tightness that spoke of profound choices just ahead. As she prepared for bed, the now open journals whispered their stories to her in the stillness of the night. What had she left untouched? The thought of unveiling her family's secrets loomed, and she shivered. Could she truly confront what was hidden, allowing both herself and her students to redefine their narratives? Or would she shy away from the confrontation? One question echoed in her mind, lingering like a shadow. Was she ready to face the history that could change everything about her, her family, and particularly her students? The air felt different in the classroom the next morning. Sarah arrived early, the weight of her decision pressing down on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. As she arranged her lesson plans, the outlines of the day before her started to shift in her mind. What if she approached her students not merely as an instructor, but as a guide, sharing profound discoveries? Each desk, a little island of stories, held potential that pulsed with life. Once her students filed in, their chatter and laughter echoed like an ancient rhythm. Sarah paused, noting the vibrant energy they brought, juxtaposed against her own internal storm. As she cleared her throat, the nerves threatened to choke her words, but she forged ahead. Today would be the beginning of something different, something more significant than the standard curriculum she had followed for years. "I want to share something personal today," she announced, her voice steadying as she connected with their gaze. Lifting the journal, she held it aloft like a secret promise. "This belonged to my great-grandmother. It's filled with stories, some joyful and others painful. I believe every story matters." Curiosity flickered across their faces. This was not merely a lesson in history. It was an invitation into her life, one she hesitated to offer, but could no longer resist. As she read a passage about the necklace, its symbolic weight in her family's struggles, the room fell silent. She watched her students, rapt and intrigued, their expressions shifting as they grasped the gravity of what she was sharing. To her surprise, they leaned in, eager for more. Aiden, her most reserved student, raised his hand. "Miss Harris, do you ever feel scared to share those stories?" His question pierced the air, resonating with a vulnerability she hadn't anticipated, but desperately needed to confront. "Often," Sarah confessed, the honesty raw in her voice. "But I realized that by sharing my fears, I might invite you to do the same." That exchange shattered something within her. No longer did she feel alone in her hesitations. Her students were navigating their own uncertainties. "How many of you have family stories you treasure, or maybe stories you find difficult to tell?" she prompted, hoping to create an atmosphere of trust. One by one, hands shot up. Each story a thread weaving into their classroom tapestry. They spoke of ancestors who overcame adversities, reflecting a rich sense of heritage she hadn't expected. Emotions swelled, and the air in the room thickened with understanding. Each narrative shared was both a revelation and a moment of empowerment for the storyteller, and Sarah felt the transformative power of their shared histories. As the day continued, the initial spark had turned into a flame. Sarah found herself thinking of her own lineage, how she had been gifted these stories only to let them drift into silence. How many more tales remained untold in both her narrative and those of her students? She sensed her mission evolving from merely being a teacher to a custodian of stories, a role she had never seen for herself. By the end of the day, her mind raced with ideas for the next lesson. What if they uncovered deeper connections to their pasts, perhaps even through the narratives she had set in motion? A project was brewing, and the energy in her mind felt electric. Still, a nagging question tugged at her. Would her students' willingness to expose their roots translate to the risks she must now take? The deeper personal truths yet to emerge from her family's legacy? By stepping into the vulnerability of their shared experiences, would she also have the courage to unveil her own shadows? Those stories tucked away in the corners of her heart, long since left unexamined? The realization hit her with dual urgency and excitement. These encounters would reshape her teaching and perhaps her entire narrative journey. The moment of truth loomed closer, and with it the resolve to confront what had long been hidden or forgotten. How deep could she dig into the lineage she had inherited? Her next lesson beckoned, as the answers lay not only in the dusty pages of old journals, but in the ready hearts and minds of her students. Questioning how far she could go, Sarah felt a deep stir within. This was just the beginning, but what awaited them all at the end of this journey? Each new day in the classroom had begun to feel transformational, yet Sarah was acutely aware of an unsettling tension bubbling beneath the surface. After the powerful exchange with her students, their enthusiasm lingered in the corners of her psyche, urging her to push boundaries she had kept intact for so long. The prospect of leading a project that delved deeper into their ancestral narratives excited her, but also ignited a swirl of apprehension. As she sat at her desk that evening, Sarah pulled up a blank document. The echoes of her students' stories reverberated within her. What was she afraid of? She reached for her grandmother's journal. It was still a foreign item, a relic wrapped in the fragility of time. Who would she be if she truly uncovered its secrets? She opened to a random page, and the words danced before her eyes. The entry detailed a trial of love. Her great-grandmother's struggle against societal expectations, fighting against the current. Sarah began to see her own resistance reflected in those inked lines. Her heart beat erratically as she realized that the strength it took to face adversity ran in her veins. Perhaps it was time to harness that strength for herself. The next day, with a refreshed sense of purpose, Sarah walked into the classroom carrying not just the journal, but a plan fortified by vulnerability. "Today, we're going to embark on a journey together," she announced, her voice firm yet inviting. "We're going to explore the untold stories of our families and how those tales have shaped who we are." She introduced the concept of family trees, but expanded it to include emotional lineage, the relationships, struggles, and legacies that shaped their family narratives. It was more than a project. It was a personal excavation, both hers and theirs. As she looked into the faces of her students, a flicker of fear and excitement sparked simultaneously within her. The weight of their gaze felt supportive yet challenging. Throughout the week, students invested themselves in their family history projects. They uncovered secrets and glories, tracking down stories that had been long obscured by time, sometimes leading them to painful truths. Sarah's excitement grew with each presentation, but it often revealed the cracks in her own narrative, the parts she struggled to articulate. One particularly poignant moment followed Aiden's presentation. He shared the legacy of a grandfather who immigrated alone, leaving behind everything familiar to seek a better life. As Aiden spoke, his voice trembled, but his bravery resonated. The collective breath they took when he concluded was heavy with unspoken understanding, yet it also pulled at Sarah's resolve. "Thank you for sharing, Aiden," she said, her mind racing with thoughts of her own grandfather, the one whose trunk of letters lay unopened. Could the stories of the past influence their futures? She was beginning to understand that each revelation not only informed their identities, but could catalyze their growth. But as newfound bravery gripped her heart, doubt seeped in. Was she ready to confront the shadows of her own past? Could she truly lead them through unknown territory when her own family secrets lay buried? The question loomed larger and darker. The lesson began to blur the lines, not just teaching students about their pasts, but guiding herself through her own obscured history. Each day, Sarah found herself standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to leap, yet hesitant. Would they brace her as she prepared to turn the flashlight onto her heart? The project had morphed into a personal challenge, an act of peeling back layers. What if, by encouraging their explorations, she could unveil her own truth? It felt as if the very act of guiding her students was compelling her to step into a different light. The urgency enveloped her as she made notes, drafting her thoughts in the comfort of her journal that had started this journey. Would she become a beacon of courage, leading them all through ancestral shadows? As her pen scratched the surface, she felt a ripple within her, a flicker of recognition that she might transform her role from mere facilitator to a co-explorer. This was no longer just about teaching. It was about healing, liberation, and the strength to confront all that their stories encompassed. The bell rang, and Sarah looked up, surprised at how much time had passed. The room filled with students stirring from their musings. But that pulse of anxiety remained. What hidden chapters awaited her? The lesson began to blur the lines, not just teaching students about their pasts, but guiding herself through her own obscured history. Each day, Sarah found herself standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to leap, yet hesitant. Would they brace her as she prepared to turn the flashlight onto her heart? The project had morphed into a personal challenge, an act of peeling back layers. What if, by encouraging their explorations, she could unveil her own truth? It felt as if the very act of guiding her students was compelling her to step into a different light. The urgency enveloped her as she made notes, drafting her thoughts in the comfort of her journal that had started this journey. Would she become a beacon of courage, leading them all through ancestral shadows? As her pen scratched the surface, she felt a ripple within her,
a flicker of recognition that she might transform her role from mere facilitator to a co-explorer. This was no longer just about teaching. It was about healing, liberation, and the strength to confront all that their stories encompassed. The bell rang, and Sarah looked up, surprised at how much time had passed. The room filled with students stirring from their musings. But that pulse of anxiety remained. What hidden chapters awaited her?
The next lesson was whispering in her ear, urging her to summon the courage to face it. How far would she go in this exploration? Was she ready to unravel her own past and share those stories with those she sought to guide? The following week dawned with an unexpected vigor that enveloped Sarah as she entered the classroom. The lingering notes of students' presentations danced through her mind, illuminating not just their discoveries, but her own potential for resilience. Each story they shared, a testament to the intricate tapestry of their histories, fostered a sense of connection she had never fully appreciated before. Yet the room felt charged, electric, as if each heart were bearing witness to a journey towards the unknown, one that included her. "Today, I want to dig deeper," she announced, her voice steady and inviting. "Let's explore not just who our ancestors were, but what they faced. What sacrifices did they make for us to be here today?" She motioned toward the whiteboard where she had sketched ideas for exploring pivotal moments in their ancestral narratives. With each word, the tangled web of her own family history threatened to surface. As students engaged in spirited discussions, the atmosphere was thick with untold possibilities. Sarah's heart raced, not just with excitement, but with the mounting pressure of her own reckoning. Would her students notice the cracks in her facade, the hesitations in her voice as she navigated their journeys while suppressing her own? During a breakout session, she overheard Claire discussing her great-grandmother's struggle against the oppressive structures of their town. "She fought for her voice, even when it felt futile," Claire exclaimed, her face alight with passion. Sarah felt a keen pang as those words pierced her own armor. What if she, too, had the strength to voice her history? Captured by the momentum of Claire's fierce declaration, Sarah made an impulsive decision. "All right, class," she began, almost breathless. "Let's take a moment to reflect on not only our ancestors' narratives, but also what we inherit, their dreams, their fears, and even their failures." Shadows loomed larger as a hint of vulnerability crept into her chest. She wondered if they were ready for her to breach that divide. As students delved into their thoughts, Sarah confronted the truth. She had become their guide, yet felt increasingly like a subject of scrutiny herself. What was she truly afraid of? Rejection? Indifference? Was her history too damaged to share, or too precious to confine to silence? Weeks rolled into endless evenings of research and exploration. Pieces of her grandmother's journal began connecting with the students' stories in unsettling ways. Where once she felt lost, a new pattern emerged, an undeniable thread of resilience coursing through her lineage. Yet, every revelation brought with it a deep-seated fear of fully confronting what lay hidden beneath the surface. During one particularly eye-opening session, she facilitated a workshop addressing the ethical dilemmas surrounding familial truths. "Not all stories are easy," she pointed out. "Some truths can hurt or reframe our identities." As words escaped her lips, the echo of her own unexamined truths screamed for acknowledgement. Sitting on the desk, Sarah caught the gaze of Aidan, his eyes curious and trusting. It struck her that in leading them towards excavation, she was the one most buried in past scars. How could she authentically guide her students if she didn't explore her shadows? That evening, trembling fingers brushed over her grandmother's journal once more, inviting a fresh perspective. This time, the ink began to reveal lines not just etched in another time, but resonating loudly in the present. The realization dawned. Her journey was an invitation for them to become brave, and perhaps their stories could light her own path.
The question lingered. Could vulnerability transform her relationships with her students and, more importantly, herself? As she closed the journal, she felt its weight shift, no longer merely an artifact, but a bridge between her fears and the expansions of her heart and mind. Determined, Sarah rose from her desk. The day had arrived for her to step entirely into the sunlight. A crucial confrontation loomed. But would the past be her ally or adversary? The threshold she stood upon felt precarious, balancing between revelation and dread, aching for the moment when she would reveal her heart. Would she forge ahead into this cathartic space, or retreat once more into silence? The next chapter awaited, thrumming with the pulse of urgency. What awaited in the depths of her lineage might reshape everything she knew. Would she dare to reveal it? The air was thick with anticipation, as the classroom buzzed with energy, an undercurrent of curiosity surging among Sarah's students. She stood at the front, her heart pounding in unison with the revelations pressing on her soul. There was no going back now. She had committed to this path of authenticity, and the moment to bridge her past with the present was upon her. Today, she declared, her voice cutting through the chatter, I want us to acknowledge how our stories intertwine. Let's dive deeply into the legacies we inherit and the burdens we carry. Each word felt like a stone thrown into still water, creating ripples that reached into her own history. The weight of exposure loomed larger than before. How would her own narrative resonate in the context of their explorations? As the room settled into a reflective silence, Sarah glanced at the journal resting on her desk, the pages filled with her grandmother's lush, delicate script. What would happen if she shared her own struggles? Would her vulnerability empower her students or expose her as a fraud? She felt the uncertainty like a palpitation in her chest, yet a flicker of resolve sparked within her. Perhaps this was the very juncture where her journey could converge with theirs. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. Let me share something personal, Sarah began, steadying herself against the rising tide of emotion. For years, I've hidden from my family's story. The struggles, the sacrifices, those stories have held me captive, and I feared that sharing them would lessen their significance. As she spoke, the room transformed into a sanctuary of acceptance. She felt eyes upon her, not in judgment but in support. Claire, Aidan, and the rest of her students embodied a collective strength, encouraging her to lay bare the fragments of her lineage. Reflecting on her grandmother's resilience, her journey as a single immigrant, facing adversity with unwavering spirit, Sarah spoke of the secrets that had remained sealed for far too long. The intimate tales of heartbreak and hope came to life. The cyclical nature of struggle and triumph unfolded, and she found strength in the act of sharing it. As she wove her narrative into the fabric of the lesson, an echo of newfound shared purpose surged around her. Yet entwined with this burst of courage was a familiar defeatist whisper that threatened to derail her resolve. Was she truly set to relive the patterns of her past, or could confession lead to liberation? It clawed at her psyche, a relentless question lingering in the corners of her mind. By sharing her history, did she risk unraveling the very foundations of her carefully constructed life? In the days that followed, Sarah continued to foster open dialogue among her students, inviting them for deeper conversations about how their personal stories intersected with the broader context of their heritage. The classroom became a crucible for discovery and danger, each revelation exhilarating yet terrifying. Would this newfound openness solidify their connection, or would exposing vulnerability uncover insecurities that could fracture their bonds? Each day was an exercise in emotional navigation as they engaged with academic rigor and personal truths. They delved into ethics, empathy, and dimensions of identity, while Sarah found herself grappling with unexpected challenges from within and outside her classroom walls. Struggling with existential doubts about her teaching methods and connection to her own ethnicity, she was caught in a web of self-analysis. The question loomed larger. Was she truly ready to confront the depths of her lineage, transforming it from burden to beacon? Preparation for their next project would demand even greater courage. They would create presentations not just about ancestors, but also about the legacies they wished to build. In their voices lay the promise of concession and conviction. The urgency was palpable. The journey was morphing into a path of interdependence. Reflecting inwards, Sarah realized she must embrace this transformative power fully if she hoped to guide her students effectively.
Just as the classroom pulsated with anticipation, her phone buzzed with a text, an unnerving message from a distant cousin seeking clarity on a family mystery that threatened to tear open unhealed wounds. Would she confront this ancestral issue directly, or shield her students from the repercussions of her own familial chaos? With a pounding heart, Sarah stood at the precipice of decision. Would she face this renewed truth head-on, or retreat once more into the shadows, risking the connections she had begun to forge? The answer loomed ahead, and only time would tell if she could bear the weight of revelation. With the stakes at their highest, she couldn't help but wonder, how deep do these roots truly run? Sarah stared at her phone's screen, the message lingering like a specter. The words were simple yet profound. I need to talk. It's about Grandma. The implications stirred a whirlwind of emotions within her. Had her grandmother's past truly been buried, or were there secrets looming just beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed? She knew she had to respond, yet hesitated, caught between the urgency to protect her students from potential fallout and a compulsive need to confront her own identity crisis. The project loomed ahead, a vessel for growth and connection, yet here she stood, teetering on the edge of doubt. Would dissecting her roots further deepen her connection with her students, or would it shatter the fragile bonds they had begun to build? The following day, as they dived into discussions on personal legacies, Sarah felt the weight of her dilemma pressing heavily on her chest. Her students shared poignant snapshots of their histories, each story an act of bravery that both inspired and disarmed her. Claire spoke of her father's struggles to provide as a newly arrived immigrant, while Aidan recounted his grandmother's hard-earned wisdom. Their resilience was palpable, invigorating the room with a unique spirit of empathy. Yet Sarah remained enshrouded in her thoughts, aware of the chasm between their authenticity and her reticence. The room pulsed with vulnerability, prompting her inner conflict to amplify with each revelation that filled the air. They were baring their souls, and, in that very vulnerability, crafting a communal sense of strength. But at what cost to her? That evening, she sat with her grandmother's journal, the inked words mirroring a legacy that often felt like an impenetrable wall. With shaking hands, she flipped through the pages, longing for a connection to the woman who had traversed hardships she could barely comprehend. What stories lay hidden? What truths would empower her, helping weave the fabric of her identity anew? Despair tightened its grip when she stumbled upon an entry filled with grief, a loss never fully reconciled. As she sank into the words, the painful yearning identified with her struggle. Did she truly honor her grandmother's trajectory by remaining silent? Or would understanding these losses grant her the clarity to illuminate her own path? Drawing inspiration from her students' bravery, Sarah took a leap of faith. The following day, she gathered her class, determination flaring within her. I want to take this a step further, she announced, her voice steadied by newfound conviction. Let's engage in a project focused not only on our ancestors, but how we wish to either continue or break away from those legacies. I will participate too. A shift swept through the classroom. Surprised glances turned into excited anticipation. Encouraged, Sarah shared that her next step would be a deeper exploration of her grandmother's life, a confrontation with the very history she had hesitated to unravel. The words flowed like a tidal wave. Futures were about to be crafted in dialects of fear and hope. As they began to brainstorm, ideas sparked wildly, igniting another layer of connection. But with each question about her lineage posed in earnest curiosity, she felt the burn of unresolved tension. Would the truths she unearthed be capable of altering the dynamics of her current relationships? Just as questions began to crystallize into meaningful discussions, her phone vibrated again, demanding her attention. A response from her cousin had arrived, an unexpected invitation to a family gathering intended to explore the mystery together. A choice loomed large before her. Would she embrace this chaotic yet potentially liberating moment, or retreat to the safety of her carefully crafted facade? The room held its breath, mirroring her swirling psyche. The stakes morphed into intricate webs of connection and discord, yet something undeniable tugged at her spirit. Could acknowledging her true identity mutate from a source of fear into a catalyst for communal transformation? Caught in this emerging narrative, Sarah knew one thing. The moment of truth was approaching, and the answer awaited her not within the confines of silence, but in the embrace of revelation. The vibrations of her phone echoed the stirring emotions churning within Sarah. Each beep felt like a countdown, urging her to make a choice. As she read her cousin's message again, clarity began to cut through the haze of confusion that had settled over her since last night's journal session. The gathering wasn't just family tradition. It was an opportunity, a chance to uncover her past and, in the process, redefine herself. With each passing moment, the weight of her uncertainty transformed into quiet determination. Her students needed their teacher to guide them through the intricacies of legacy with authenticity. If she wanted to embrace the journey of self-discovery alongside them, she had to step into the light, not just share the shadows of her history. After dismissing her class, Sarah lingered in the empty room, her mind swimming with possibilities. What if she crafted a lesson around the upcoming family gathering? Not only could she excavate her own roots, but she could use what she unearthed to enrich the educational experience, offering her students a real-time study of legacy. The thought filled her with urgency as she grabbed her notebook and began drafting an outline for what she would share when she returned to class. But the pen hesitated against the paper. Would sharing her vulnerabilities strengthen her relationship with her students? Or would it risk shattering the distance that had largely shielded her from intimacy? Could unresolved issues genuinely fill the gaps in her educational engagement? As Sarah paced the room, an idea took root. She would journal each evening, threading her reflections on the family gathering together with notes on her students' projects. She envisioned drawing parallels between the stories shared at the event and those revealed by her students. This dual exploration could underline the universality of personal journeys, an unmistakable connection across generations and circumstances. That night, an uncharacteristic restlessness rebuffed her attempt to sleep. Throughout the dark hours, images of her grandmother danced in her mind, an enduring figure whose choices had shaped the very foundation of Sarah's existence. An innate force stirred her from bed, a hunger not just to remember, but to interrogate. What would she learn at the family gathering that could reshape her understanding of legacy and its implications? The next day, standing before her class, she unveiled her plan. In preparation for our project, I'll be confronting some family truths myself, she began, meeting their expectant faces with a mix of pride and trepidation. We're going to merge our personal stories with historical legacies. But I want you all to realize that discovering these narratives can stoke fears and uncertainties. Together, we can explore how to face them. Excited whispers erupted in the room, each student eager to share their own anticipation and trepidations about such a personal dive. Sarah recognized the opportunity this presented, not just for them, but for her as well. Competing feelings tightened her chest. She was terrified and thrilled at the same time. As the lesson flowed and ideas began to morph into structured plans, Sarah felt a sense of clarity returning.
Each student's courage resonated within her, strengthening her resolve. They were all shaped by layers of history, but they weren't obliged to be prisoners to it. But as the day wore on and the gathering drew closer, doubt began to creep in again. When her phone buzzed, announcing another message from her cousin, it bore the weight of anticipation and pressure. With a racing heart, she opened it, bracing herself for what it might reveal. The invitation was laced with the commitment of family ties, but layered underneath was the sensation of impending vulnerability.
Would she truly be able to muster the strength to confront her family history, or would the shadows from her past reclaim their hold over her? The moment of truth lingered like an open door, waiting for her to take a decisive step. The gathering approached with a mix of dread and exhilaration that danced within Sarah's chest. As she prepared for the family event, she felt the weight of her own legacy pressing down on her shoulders. This was the moment she had been both yearning for and fearing. Would she find the courage to confront the truths that had long been kept at bay, or would she fall into the depths of silence that seemed safer? The day arrived, casting a gray veil over the sky, matching the turmoil she felt within. At the venue, a modestly decorated hall echoing with laughter and distant voices, Sarah inhaled sharply. This was her family, familiar strangers, a collection of stories trapped together, teetering on the edge of revelation. She stepped across the threshold, the air thick with anticipation and unspoken narratives. With each embrace, questions swirled. How are you? What are you working on? But one voice rose above the cacophony, her cousin Jacob's. He pulled her aside, eyes aflame with urgency. "Sarah, I've uncovered something," he whispered. "It's about Grandma's past. It's tied to everything we've been investigating together." The tremor of his voice echoed her own internal quake. This was the road she had been summoned to take. Caught off guard, Sarah faltered. Were these new revelations fraught with familial complications, or were they the keys to unlocking understanding? She couldn't help but think about how unveiling these truths might instigate a shifting dynamic between her and her students. But here, surrounded by family, she finally recognized that her story was intertwined with theirs. As the evening unfolded, candles flickered with warmth, illuminating faces that mirrored her own. Within the ebb and flow of conversation, she began to grasp the gravity of their shared history. Story after story emerged, layered with trials and triumphs, sorrow and perseverance. Each tale seemed to invite her deeper into the complexity of her lineage. When it came time for Jacob to share what he had discovered, anticipation wrapped around the room. "I found letters from Grandma," he revealed, his voice steadying the room. "She wrote about struggles we never spoke of, the choices she made when she arrived, the sacrifices that haunted her." The room fell into silence, each person absorbing the implications of her past struggles. In that moment, Sarah felt the tenuous string of courage pull her forward. She rose, her heart pounding, and addressed her family. "I've been on a journey to explore our history in my classroom. It's deeply intertwined with who we are. I want to share what I've learned about my grandmother, my family, and how we carry these stories into our own lives." A murmur of understanding rippled through the crowd. She spoke of her grandmother's resilience, of her quest to uplift her family amidst hardship, and how that legacy had shaped Sarah's own educational journey. Her voice wavered with emotion, but she pressed on, weaving her narrative into theirs. As she shared the challenges she faced as a teacher, echoes of her grandmother's tenacity intertwined with the heartfelt struggles she had seen in her own students' lives. "I want you to understand," she proclaimed, voice growing stronger. "These stories matter. They shape who we are, not just as individuals, but as a collective. And I realized that the stories I feared to share are also the very stories that can empower and connect us all." There, under the warm glow of the hall, she felt a wave of acceptance wash over her.
As her words fell into shared space, her family members nodded, their hearts echoing sentiments of revelation and understanding. Before the night ended, they opened the floor for everyone to share their own legacies, their secrets, and their stories. What followed was an avalanche of honesty, a chorus of voices unveiling layers of history that existed beyond the confines of their shared home. Sarah saw how each recounting strengthened their ties. This was not just her moment, it was their shared triumph. As the darkness enveloped the evening, she felt a profound change within herself, a culmination of her journey. She had stepped into vulnerability and emerged carrying the weight of legacy alongside renewed purpose. Returning to her classroom the next week, Sarah approached the front with newfound confidence. "Today, we'll connect the stories we've uncovered with what we've learned about ourselves," she announced, excitement dancing in her eyes. "Together, we'll create our own legacies." As her students began sharing their refined narratives, Sarah felt something resonate deep within her. Each story layered into a larger tapestry, washing away her fears. Encouraged by the rawness and connectedness they were cultivating, she knew they were all transforming together. In this profound moment of culmination, she achieved clarity, not just the fulfillment of her career aspirations as a teacher, but an authentic understanding of her identity. The joy of sharing became intertwined with the lesson that vulnerability leads to strength. Sarah stood at the intersection of her past and future, grounded in newfound confidence and empowered to help foster the same in her students. She had proven to herself that confronting her family's legacy would illuminate paths for others, allowing them to draw on their histories to shape their own destinies. In the end, she succeeded, not just in uncovering her own truths, but in helping others realize that their stories, too, carried the power to conquer their futures. This was not just professional growth, but authentic metamorphosis, reaffirming her place as an educator ignited by the stories of the past.
Sarah had arrived, not as a teacher confined by her fears, but a guide who would ensure that no story, especially hers, would remain silent again. Now, if you're inspired by Sarah's journey of transformation and triumph, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for more exclusive emotional stories that redefine resilience. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others discover these life-changing narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about Sarah's journey and the lessons learned. Don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. The power of uncovering one's story is something we can all learn from.